Welcome to Silent Service. My name is Will. That is Matt. He is in his car today driving to a meeting, but so glad we could do this anyway. Matt, how are you, sir?
Will, I'm dedicated. You and I are dedicated to this mission. So, you know, we're not going to let a little trip derail us. I hope
No.
I hope you can hear me okay though. I do have my AirPods in. I don't have the, traditional mic that I've been using. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you
Okay.
okay.
All right, great.
Well,
Well, we're not going to make a habit of this, but we're at least able to squeeze one in. So, Will, you're my passenger for today. I'm
heck
driving.
heck
You're my
yeah, I
passenger.
am. And totally we won't make a habit of it, but we do what we can with what we have for today. So for the listener, I hope you're doing well. What we're going to be chatting about with you today is this idea of the silent courage that's required to change your career. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit. Matt's been thinking about this quite a bit. Ultimately choosing to change your career is a huge deal because some people have been in the same career for 20 years and they just want something different. Or, they're upset, they're frustrated with their job because they don't like their boss. They're belittled constantly and they just need a change. So Matt, as my mentor, is going to be helping me understand some of these ideas. So before we get into that, though, Matt, I'd love to hear your MAPS again. For the new listener out there, this is an acronym that goes, how am I feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? So, Matt, you have the floor.
All right, let's go. Mentally, I am feeling good. Emotionally, I am feeling stable. Physically, I'm feeling strong. And spiritually, I am feeling grounded. That's how I'm doing today. How about you?
Amen, brother. Happy Tuesday to you. Sounds
I
like a good
know.
one.
Same to you. It is. It's a good day. Good day.
Thank you, thank you. Mentally, I'm evolving, understanding that it's okay that I don't know what I don't know, and we're just gonna take what we have and put our best foot forward. Emotionally, I'm feeling proud that I have this opportunity to chat with you and to help some people out. Physically, I feel awesome, really do, just love it. And spiritually, I feel faithful to the Most High because I know that I'm never alone, which is a fantastic feeling. And I am so truly blessed. So, amen to
It's
that.
so true. And I mean, like, on the theme of, today's topic, because I've been asked about this a lot, right? Like how do I change careers? Like what are the first steps that one would take to be able to, begin making substantial change in one's career? And just as a reminder before we get into it, right? If like that's something that you're weighing, or I'm sorry, if that's something that's like weighing heavily on you, right? Like don't own it alone, right? Like this is you and the big man upstairs. So like bring God into this, right? Like it's the two of you, that are facing this challenge together. It's not you alone.
Right. Right. And it's crucial to draw as close as you can to the Lord Himself because He knows some of the things that you're trying to figure out. And He's just trying to gently push you in the right direction. So it's so vital to your success to lean on Him as much as possible.
And I'm smiling because sometimes the Lord will help you be exposed to things that you don't want. So you know that those are things that you don't want. So,
Yeah.
for anyone who's in a crappy situation or crappy circumstance, there is value to be gained. So we'll talk about that. I don't mean to like get into it too quickly, but I'm excited for this conversation.
No, yeah. I am too. As always, I look forward to our episodes that come out Wednesday, Friday a lot. So, for the listener, this episode is for you and for anyone who feels pulled towards something new, but might be a little hesitant to let go of the career that they've built. So, if that's you, remember this quote that I tell myself all the time. It's better to try and fail than to never try at all. So, changing careers isn't just about your work, it's about stepping into something deeper that might offer you greater fulfillment, which is sincerely the purpose of life, right? And that shift often starts quietly, right? I.e., silent service, with just one act of this service. So, in terms of this pivot, Matt, you and I were talking just a little bit ago, but just picking your brain a little bit here. Let's say I'm unhappy. I've been at my job for going on 5 years. I've been promoted a handful of times, and I'm just not, looking forward to each day like I used to. Not to mention my boss is giving me a hard time. So in this instance, do you feel it's best to just quit if I'm not happy, even if I don't have another opportunity? Or how do you recommend I navigate this situation?
Well, first and foremost, I have a million questions for this hypothetical individual because like my mind is just running all over the place, wondering, is it the work itself that is not enjoyable? Is it the people you're around that's making the work unenjoyable? Is it career mobility, diminished upward mobility, like diminished, opportunities for future growth and monetary enhancement, right? Like what is the link that is causing friction or that's causing, the unhappiness, if you will? And where I think that it's important to start is on like a framework for happiness within the workplace. And I ultimately don't think it's any employer's responsibility, to make happy people. However, if they can help facilitate happiness, like why wouldn't they? So there are a few things that I typically look for, in a business if I was going to be like a W-2 employee, just in terms of like psychologically understanding like what makes us happy as humans. And this is something I've talked a lot about before, so I may have covered it on another one of our episodes, Will. But happiness in the workplace, which has been evidenced and broken out in the book Delivering Happiness. So Tony Hsieh, who is the founder of Zappos, wrote that book, Delivering Happiness. Highly, highly, highly recommend it, especially for someone who's younger, who's like incredibly driven towards like monetary success. Because as you read through the life experiences of Tony, you begin to realize, mission, over capital. And it just fundamentally will change, at least in my opinion, how you view the world, mission, purpose. Nonetheless, Tony outlines four elements that are required for employee happiness. The first of which is perceived control. So, as an employee, you need to have perceived control. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter. It must be perceived to be real by the employee. Control meaning like I have control over my day to day. I have control over the ability to achieve a bonus or the ability to achieve a promotion, right? Like I am in control of my destiny. I'm not being micromanaged by someone else. Someone's not suppressing me by pushing their thumb down on me, right? Like I am in control. I'm sovereign. I have the ability to enhance my career, or I have the ability to stay complacent and stay, exactly where I'm at. So control, or at least perceived control, is the first element. The second element is perceived progress. Again, it doesn't matter necessarily if it's real or not, but the perception has to be real. So perceived progress, as in you're getting closer to the next promotion. Perhaps you're saving for, to be a first-time homeowner, and you're getting closer and closer to making that dream become a reality because of your earnings and the ability to save. You're developing people, you're developing your team, you're watching them get better, right? This is that progress that so many of us are looking for, because it's not fun to just stay at the same grade level year after year after year. So we do want skill development, we do want to progress as individuals. So that's number two. Number three is connectedness. It's enjoying the people that you're surrounding yourself with on a day-to-day basis. Forgive my language, but if you're walking into the office sitting next to an asshole each and every day, more, likely than not, you're just not going to enjoy going into the office. So
Totally.
that third level is connectedness, making sure that you like the people that you're around, that they're not energy vampires, just sucking energy, out of you and out of the business and out of colleagues. So that third level again is connectedness. The fourth and final element, which is very, very difficult to find. In fact, a lot of people are able to find one, two, and three, but it's that fourth element that's really hard. And that fourth element is a purpose. It's a purpose and a mission that is larger than all of us, that we can all rally behind. Think David versus Goliath as an example. And just to give you like a real life example, Will, when I was involved in building physical, we were a private practice physical therapy business, and the enemy was hospitals and physician owned physical therapy practices. there was a conflict of interest that existed in that space, and they were the big, 800-pound gorilla, and we were ultimately the underdog going up against them. So like there was a purpose.
Kind of
So
like
if I
PE
Yeah,
versus
please.
family owned.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Okay.
Like mom and
Yeah.
pop or independence versus private equity backed. Like there
Okay.
is, but usually you fall on one of the two, sides of that fence. But nonetheless, like back to your original question, I'm answering your question with more questions. I want to know, like, of these four elements, where's my unhappiness coming from? Is it coming from the lack of control? Is it coming from the lack of progress? Is it coming from the lack of connectedness? Just because, again, I don't like the people that I'm around? Or is it just fundamentally due to that, like, I don't perceive what I'm doing to be adding major value into the world, right? I may just be a cog in a wheel, and that's not something that I want. So, I wish I could give you just a genuine black and white answer, Will, to this question, but I can't because we're people, and, we're dynamic, and we have all these different things going on in our lives and at work. And, I think probably no two situations are exactly alike, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and I think you did extremely well with the information that you had. Uh, Based on your answer, I'm understanding that it was a bit more of an ambiguous question than I previously thought. However, the two most common things that I hear from the perspective of somebody that's not enjoying their job is that connectedness. They lack it, they don't feel connected to their employees, right? Their company that they're working for might not implement the no asshole rule, excuse my French. And that's a problem. And also, too, you mentioned cog in the wheel. They might very well feel, well, they do very well feel like a number because they work for a massive company with franchises across the US, and they don't understand how they're ever going to make an impact by looking at spreadsheets all day long. So, in terms of this pivot, if you will, moving on to a different role or to a different company, for the listener, whether you're just fresh out of college or you've been working the same job for a handful of years, we tend to imagine career change like a clean jump, if you will, right? The perfect job appears, the person you want to work for most in the world or your area, all your skills align, your confidence never wavers, you're ecstatic about this opportunity. But, obviously reality comes in and tends to take a toll, if you will, because there's uncertainty, there's loss of what you had, you don't see the same people anymore, your routine is disrupted, and there's risk too, right? You're jumping into a new opportunity that it is totally unclear. You don't know if you'll like it, and you don't know if you'll make a legitimate impact. But that is where, just from understanding here, is where this transformation begins because comfort, right? What you've been doing keeps you consistent, but finding something else, i.e., your calling, invites growth, which allows fulfillment. Would you agree, Matt?
I do, yeah. And I also think it requires exposure, because just so frequently we haven't been exposed to different things to better understand whether like we're naturally inclined or good at some of those different things. And I don't know about you, but I definitely think that we like the things that we're good at, like as
Hmm.
people,
Yeah.
right? Like who likes things that they're really, really bad at? It's like most of us don't.
They are very few and far between. But it's interesting. That reminds me of a few episodes from the Founders podcast. It's like James Cameron and all these wonderful entrepreneurs. They like to the people that have created massive conglomerates. They like to focus on the things that are really hard and that no one else is doing. I guess
Right,
that's
right,
just
right.
another cool tidbit in of itself. But so practically, when you do change your career, Matt, you're starting over. You're becoming a beginner again. And I think that terrifies a lot of people, so much so that it makes them just completely avoid a change. Do you find that in your experience, most people are avoiding a change because of the fear, or do you tend that most people are like, whatever, I'll figure it out?
I think most people tend to avoid confrontation. And
Yes.
many
Yes.
times, the challenge that they have in their existing role and workplace could potentially be solved through confrontation. But frequently, we don't want to engage in confrontation and take the path of least resistance. And the
Hmm.
path of least resistance is I'm just going to either hide my head in the sand and not do anything and just continue to stay, we'll call it miserable, or the path of least resistance is quitting and just going to another job. Like that is the path of least resistance. But that's we as humans, that's what we do. Like if there was a little fire created, right, you just rush the exit. It's a path of least resistance. Like that's just what would happen. So, like frequently when, like it's just when we're not doing well, many times we're also not thinking clearly. So I love the exercise of, again, and reading the things that I like about this role, the things that I don't like about this role. Again, is it tied to one individual person? Is it tied to the overarching business, like their deliverables and what they do and what they stand for and the culture? Right? There's so many different dynamics involved here that it's just a very difficult question ultimately to be able to answer.
Mm. Okay. This is a rapid fire question, Matt, but if a close friend of yours
Let's do it.
were to come to you and say, Matt, I hate my job. I don't care for I respect the people, but I don't care to see them anymore on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sick and tired of my job. I don't have another opportunity or a contract to go to work for another company, but I think I'm gonna leave. Like, what would if that person were me, what might you say to me?
I would first say pause. The grass is always greener, just right out the gate. And number two, by no means would we ever look towards quote quitting this job until we have our next opportunity lined up. I mean, like a part of life, Will, is just the game of survivorship, right? So like I'm anticipating that my friend that I'm currently speaking with is independent and or they support like their family. And right, like we have to have access to some level of capital to live and survive. So for me, protecting what exists and what we have becomes first and foremost. So like I have to protect what I have. Then I want to focus on growing it. So if I'm going to communicate with one of my friends or one of my buddies, about this, I would be saying, like, whoa, 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 grass is always greener, always, always, always. Talk to me about what you're looking at. And then the second thing would be, right, we're not going to plan an exit until we have that next opportunity, clearly lined up. I'm gonna continue to, stay in the season of suck until I have my next opportunity identified.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, it seems
Rent,
like a
rent's got to
card.
be paid.
It seems like a cardinal rule in business, now that we're talking about this, never leave a position unless you have another position, right?
Well, it's just hard. Like, well, if I'm interviewing you and you tell me that you're in between roles, and I would just like help me understand what happened, right, where you were. And if you were telling me something along the lines where I couldn't handle the people, so I thought, like my dignity was worth more than, like the day to day belittling. So I just told them I quit. Like to me as an operator, like it would display like a red flag that you weren't thoughtful enough about yourself. It's almost like you were too emotional, you were too irrational to think about financial security. And to me it would be it would be eternal.
Right.
So like it just would be. I'm just giving you the feedback, again, as an owner, as an operator, that is my opinion. If you were not working when I was interviewing you, like that's what my thought would be.
No, that makes perfect sense. And it reminds me, I guess it's an idea for a future episode. It's like I sat down with well the father of a close friend, and I asked him for, his expertise with regards to interviewing, and he told me never, and I wrote it down, never jump ship for the first 4 months of with a company, not for the company or anybody that works there, but for yourself, out of self-respect. So it almost sounds like don't leave a company if you don't have another opportunity out of self-respect.
Yeah, I agree with that. I may change some of those words, but fundamentally, directionally, I think that is absolutely accurate.
Okay.
And some things just require time, right? Like if you move into a new role, once again, chances are you're not going to be an expert on day one. Like
Yeah.
it takes time to be able to learn a new industry. It takes time to understand verbiage and to, learn the inner workings and then to develop your skills. And in some situations, it just takes a little bit of time. So many
Right.
times, right, wanting to quit at like 2 months or 3 months in, it's like you haven't even scratched the surface in terms of what, is possible in that particular role. But again, without understanding what it is that we're talking about, right, we're just in this vague ambiguity, black hole of space here.
Right. But I think it's valuable most certainly valuable to somebody who's in this stage of life where they're not sure as to just how much fulfillment they're getting and they want something new and different.
It's
Um,
true. Yeah, it's
most
it's that's very true. But I think maybe we should unpack, some of these different situations that one may be in, right? There's the I don't like the people or I don't like my boss. There's the I don't have enough opportunity here, right? Like I can't see how I'm supposed to be able to make more money. There's the I don't necessarily like the deliverables, of this business. Like I don't like specifically what this business does and what it stands for, right? Like maybe
yeah.
they, are a cigarette manufacturer, right? Like don't know, So like we could talk through perhaps a couple of those different situations because like naturally I'm just expecting someone on the other end to have a unique situation that they're just hoping and praying that we hit on.
Yeah, like most definitely. So my mind went exactly as you said to cigarettes. Like if a person is, let's say a person is quite good at what they do, but the product that they work to sell is not one that is meaningful to them. Like you said cigarettes. Like what if I don't know, what if they were selling paint and they couldn't care less about art? Like they were a sports fanatic and just found it incredibly boring. Like was it bad that they took the job when that was their best opportunity at the time? Should they try to figure out how to like it or focus on the people as opposed to the
Yeah.
product?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, part of it just depends on who you are as a person. Like again, I'm not necessarily proud of this, Will, but I was the type of person early on in my career that was after financial stability. I didn't care what the role was, as long as it wasn't hindering the rights of others and as long as it wasn't something that was illegal, I didn't really care. So is manufacturing cigarettes illegal? No. Like, are there moral and ethical, related challenges? Yes, absolutely. But like early on in my career, because what I was after, was like the gold at the end of the rainbow. I didn't really care. And again, like I've changed and I've evolved as a person, and I do care deeply in terms of how I make money. It is very impactful and meaningful to me. But it just depends on that individual, what stage of life they're in, who are they, like that does matter.
Right.
I'm not saying that someone shouldn't necessarily be, only focused on financials, and I'm not saying that someone, should be. I'm just saying that's who I was. And
Mhm.
again, not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, it's just who I was.
So, yeah, right, that makes total and complete sense, and I'd love to chat some more sometime with you about physical, because we haven't really gone down that rabbit hole to see if you actually liked physical therapy. But let's bring it around here a second. Like, let's say I'm well, just something that's personal to me. Like a good friend of mine reached out to me. His name's Connor, wonderful guy. He's finishing up a year of service in Oregon. So he'll be moving back to Boston to kickstart his career. And I've heard this quote thrown around by even some very well-to-do people that nobody likes their first job. And in fact, it's better that you don't like your first job because you learn an awful lot about yourself doing that work. Like, what do you think about that as as somebody that's fairly deep in their career?
I'm smiling because I agree with it
Oh, okay.
completely. Like you will get exposed to the things that you like and the things that you don't like. And gaining exposure to the things that you don't like is just as valuable as getting exposed to the things that you do like.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing if you have a bad manager or a bad boss. You can specifically take notes on what not to do. That is just as valuable as learning what to do, right? That is the
Yes.
exact same process as inversion that you and I have spoken about in the past, right? If I became a brand new manager, a brand new leader of a business, and I'm taking over a team for the very first time in my life, right? I would begin asking myself, like, what is a surefire way to make sure that this team fails together? And I would create the list and just avoid those things.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing if you have a terrible boss. Create the list of things that they do that you despise and avoid those things when you become a manager, a leader, a teacher, a boss, right? Like there's as much value there as you get, from a wonderful boss. And same thing, it's like you're writing down the list of the things that I love that this individual does. This is why I perceive this individual to be a phenomenal boss and leader. And you want to follow suit and replicate what they do.
Right. And I wouldn't characterize your first job, if you ultimately don't like your first job, as failure. But isn't it interesting, Matt, that when we share our resume with a potential employer, it goes through all of our successes and doesn't talk about what we really learned, which is where we failed? Like, imagine a world where your entire resume was built upon the failures that you've had and what you learned. Because people that want to be wise, right, the only way to learn is to fail. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I was thinking about that the other day.
If resumes showed that, I think we'd find different talent that we otherwise would not see. And what I mean by that is like, pretend I lost $1 million investing in some weird corner of the crypto universe. Well, I just have gained a valuable learning lesson to the tune of 7 figures. Like, you wouldn't want to gain the same level of knowledge and experience that I have after burning $1 million, right? Like, yet that would never be displayed or shown on a resume,
Right.
ever, ever.
Yeah. It's
And
funny
so,
that that hits home for me. I certainly didn't lose seven figures, but I lost a few hundred, if you will, on some crypto that didn't work out too well. But
I'm sure you've learned, but you probably haven't learned nearly as much as the guy who's lost 1 million.
no. Yeah. Yeah. Crypto's a funny thing, that's for sure.
But like when it comes back again, around to like, hey, I'm just not happy. It's like, what are the reasons why you're not happy? If it's just a money thing, like that's the easiest challenge to solve. Most don't recognize that even a culture that's not truly a meritocracy, which is merit based, right? Like it's not age, gender, race, religion. It's truly about the value contribution of that individual within the organization that determines their compensation. That's ultimately what you want to find, a culture of a meritocracy. My very first corporate position was with a company called Gartner. They were engaged in information technology consulting, and it was a business that I could not get a promotion without investing an additional 24 months in the current role. So you are not eligible for a promotion without 24 months of tenure in the existing role, irregardless of performance. So that is the opposite of a culture of a meritocracy. That was time based, right? You basically are going to earn your promotion just through time, which is just like a ploy on loyalty, if you will. So that was not the environment for me. And that's more than likely not the environment that most of you are in who are listening to this. Most of you are in a culture of a meritocracy, but you may not realize it. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is if you presented a plan to the CEO, the president, the general manager of the business or the division that you currently support and operate that shows specifically how the team can reach for additional opportunity, and I'm making it up. Maybe the plan that you create has the business unit generating an additional $1 million of net income. If that's the case and you're presenting this plan, and let's just say, Will, you're presenting the plan to me, I
okay.
would I would just be so shocked, first and foremost, that you're pushing me. I'm not having to pull you. You're pushing me and you're saying, like, hey, Matt, you're missing this opportunity over here, or you're not seeing this opportunity over here. With a little bit of risk capital and with the right people in place, we could go after this and we could make an extra $1 million. I would think through it and I'd be like, wow, like, how unique is that for me to have an individual who's coming and presenting new opportunities to me? Naturally, like that is someone that I would look at as like a leader on the team. But more importantly, after reading through that plan, if it was justifiable, fact based and seemingly plausible, I'd be like, well, you're going to be the man that's going to do it. Like you're going to be the man that's going to execute this plan. And I got to ask you, if you are able to generate this company an additional million this year, what do you want in return? And now you get to name your own price. Like
Right.
that's how one gains tremendously greater opportunity in life. No one's going to come and drop a plan into your lap, Will, that says, hey, this is how you're going to be able to make an extra $1 million this year. If someone was going to do that, they would execute the plan upon themselves to generate that additional 7 figures of income. You following me?
Yeah.
So frequently we're just stuck in our day to day and we're not thinking about the business at a macro level. Like, what are we not doing? What are we not capitalizing on? Where does our customer service suck? Like, what can we do to enhance, loyalty, repeat purchase, or whatever it is that you're engaged in? Again, it's where can we create additional monetary value? And if we can create additional monetary value, you can wrap your arms around some of it and take it for yourself. Not all of it, but a good portion of it. And that's what so many people just miss. Now, that's a completely different challenge than someone who's saying, I just can't stand my boss, right? I love my job. I love the company. I love the culture. It's just the person I report to is an a hole, and I don't want to work with them anymore. That's a different challenging, circumstance to be able to overcome. And it is going to require confrontation. It's inevitable. That's what it's going to require.
Right. And the boss, the individual that you report to, is going to respect you more once you ultimately say something, speak up.
You have to. And at the end of the day, what do you have to lose? If you're already sensing that you're going to be quitting and you're already looking for something else, if that was me and I was going to head on, head front, head first confrontation, one, I would want to have a secondary option or an opportunity lined up just in case the conversation that I expect to have does not go as planned. I do want to have, a backup in place.
Yeah. Matt,
Having that backup in place will help me have the confidence to have the conversation the way that I know I need to have the conversation, not just dance around it, if that makes sense.
right. It's almost like your future self will appreciate you and respect you even more so for doing that. Like you
Yes.
have to. And you said earlier on
Yes.
that most people, well, they might miss a few things, but one of the big things is that they miss the opportunity to confront the individual that is inhibiting their job satisfaction.
Right.
So I mean, that's fascinating, and I don't mean to be self-indulgent here, Matt, but there have been a few times where I've thought about an idea here or there, evening, weekend, it's just come to my mind, and I haven't really shared it with you because of fear that you would shoot it down or be like, what the heck? And I wouldn't know how to explain it properly. But I suppose I'm super grateful for this conversation because on the topic of it's inappropriate to assume what you want to do with your time, you will um, entertain the idea or not. Yeah, I learned from trying. So really, there's absolutely no excuse to not bring up something. So,
Yeah, for sure. But like, I'm glad you bring this up because I want to get into it with more specificity. What I'm referring to, Will, is a full blown out plan. I am not referring to ideas.
okay.
That is something that I don't really want, don't really care about. Like as an owner operator, like, I mean, of course, ideas can be valuable, but ideas are also like assholes and everyone has one. It is the execution of the idea that
Yes.
ultimately matters. So, right. So as an employee working for me, right, I don't want you to be like, hey, here's an idea, here's an idea. I want the full blown out plan that tells me specifically how to execute upon the plan. How
Yeah.
are we measuring the execution? What do we know what done looks like? Like I want full blown out plan written that I could hand to anyone within the organization and say, read this plan. This is what we're going to execute. And they do not have any questions. That is completely different than sharing an idea. So when I presented a plan like this to my boss at Physical, well, I had to have spent no less than 2 months on this plan. It was that level of detail. I think the whole thing overarching was maybe like 12, 13 pages, like in totality, but it answered all of the questions, that I thought like a board, would be asking. So that's what I'm referring to. Not an idea, more so a business plan that has the execution laid out. Is that a little bit more clear?
That is super clear. You wrote that plan to your mentor?
Yeah, yeah. My mentor, my boss. I saw unique opportunity that we were not engaged in. So yeah, I developed a plan. I shared how I thought the business could make a lot more money, and in exchange, I wanted a lot of that money to come into my pocket. And that plan was ultimately accepted, executed upon. I did it, and the money did go into my pocket.
How cool is that? That's amazing. I
Yeah,
so appreciate
yeah,
that. And
very cool.
I usually don't take notes so I can listen wholeheartedly, like multitasking doesn't exist, but I had to write that down. So I appreciate that so much, Matt.
Which
But
one? The ideas are like, no, I'm just kidding.
no, just the fact that
Shame on me with my potty mouth today.
it's okay. You're only human. You know that, Matt.
Yes. Yeah, the for everyone out there, I do have little kids at home, so I try my best to refrain from any profanity at home. So on occasion, when I'm out of the house, sometimes it slips.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the listener will appreciate that. But I don't have kids, so I'm actually gonna say it one more time because for the listener, there's a great book called The No Asshole Rule. And
Yes,
if your company or your prospective company isn't aware of this book or this rule, it might do the company extremely well to implement it and
but
even
hold on. If your boss is an asshole, do not
stand by.
hand them that book. Do not hand them that book because that will be that will be such a funny sign. But that's not the way to do it. That's not
Yeah,
confrontation.
yeah.
That's a subtle cue.
Right. That's a subtle sign of love, Can't
That's funny.
can't be doing that. The bird, if you will. But no, this is so fantastic. I really do hope that you, the listener, come away with some newfound ideas and to break all of this down. You may not have a ton of clarity with regards to what your next step is, your next employment opportunity is, but the most important thing you can do is just try, try to bring more fulfillment and satisfaction into your life. So if you're standing at the edge of this career change, just go for it. Like even if you're nervous, even if it's messy, even if it's ultimately slower than you had hoped, starting over may cost you this comfort that you've had, but it may give you a better future that you otherwise didn't think was an opportunity.
Yeah,
So
I just think like it's your life. You have to take control of your life. No one's going to care about your life as much as you do. No one. So if you're unhappy, I would run just deep analysis to understand like what am I unhappy with? Is it everything, or is it a person? Is it upward mobility? Right? Like what is it that I'm unhappy with? Because many times you can solve for that unhappiness without having to leave and move into something else. But if that cannot be solved, then yeah, that is the prudent thing to do. Get your butt into a new vehicle that you think will help you get you ultimately to where it is that you're trying to go.
very well said, Matt. In closing, I had a random question I wanted to run by you. On one of our first interactions, you mentioned, what do you want or what do I want my life to look at? And I mentioned that I wanted to have a nice property with flowers and, really nice kept lawn. And I said I want to do it myself. And then that idea has sort of matriculated into other areas, namely washing a car. So as somebody that's, a well-to-do person who has a whole lot going on, for your sake. But for me, I spent 2 hours last night washing my car. I'm wondering, is that a bad sort of being vulnerable here? Is that a bad use of my time? Like, should I instead just be reading instead? Or what do you think?
Not if it brings you enjoyment and pleasure, then no. I don't think so. It just depends on whether it brings you pleasure or not. Ultimately, you can break down to see what tasks become trivial based upon your income. and this is pretty fun to do. Whatever your annualized salary is, let's just say, to make it simple, let's just say it was 60,000 bucks. Divide that number in half, right? 60 divided into two is 30. So you make 30 bucks an hour. So you spent 2 hours, washing your car. And if you were making $60,000 on an annualized basis, right, that's 30 an hour times two, that's 60 bucks. So could you have gotten your car cleaned for $60 or less? Because if yes, then statistically, like it would have made more sense than just have paid someone. But that's also assuming that you would have been able to earn in those 2 hours that use to then wash your car, and that's not always the case. So you get my point. Like okay, you're making $1 million a year. Does it make sense for you to wash your car? Like, of course not. But does
No.
it bring you great satisfaction? Is it therapeutic? Is it enjoyable? If it is, do it, right? Like, why wouldn't you? So sometimes it's not about like whether or not this quote makes sense or whether this is quote productive. If it makes me happy, then like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, right? Like, who cares if it's not quote right in society's eyes or from a math-based perspective? Like, what matters is, your happiness. That's what matters.
For sure. For sure. We'll have to see about in the future. I just have this thing where I don't love people doing things for me, even if as simple as a car wash. But I understand that, you know, payment is involved, so it's okay. But I just kind of like doing things on my own in favor of silent service,
I
if you will. So
Yeah, but I look at it as like spurring economic activity. Like I have I
yeah,
have
yeah,
I have groundskeepers,
totally.
for our property, and I take great pleasure in seeing the work that it provides, you know, for this many people, and they have families to provide and take care of. If everyone did everything for themselves, right, like we wouldn't necessarily have an economy. It's like we have to trade goods and services, but I'm not going to trade the things that I like to do, for the things that I don't like to do.
Right, right. That's a great way to flip it, helping the economy for the
Yeah,
country that we love. So awesome.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
correct.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Matt, for the listener?
I don't, I just, on the career side of it, if we could, like if anyone's got some real, challenging situations, from a career perspective, like I highly encourage you to write in, send a message, we'll do it with anonymity. We'll talk through your situation. We can break it down. We can even bring you on as a guest. Again, we'll conceal who it is that you are. But I think that this is something that requires a little bit, more context and detail to get like really specific. But
Right.
hopefully, we covered at least enough at a high level to be able to do some introspection to understand where the unhappiness is coming from.
Yeah. So well said. Yeah, for the listener, you're welcome to reach out to me at will@silentservicepodcast.com with any of your questions or concerns. We can chat about them on this platform. And, it says so in the bottom of the description on Apple or Spotify, whatever you listen to. But the goal of this podcast between Matt, my mentor, and myself as the mentee is just to help you, right? Just silently serve you. So we're not trying to make any capital off of this opportunity. We'll simply donate all of the funds we get to charity. We just want to be there to serve you. So let us know any of your questions. And of course, there's a quote here that encapsulates this episode well on the idea of trial and error, right? Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb, says, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." So failure is just feedback. Go ahead and think about that throughout the rest of your week. And yeah, Matt, thanks so much for chatting with me and the listener.
You got it, man. Take care. See you later.
All right. See you later. Drive safe.
Thanks.